is if you're not worried about how much money you pass on to the next generation, growing your net worth across your life, at some point you got to bring it down because you're passing on money to a next kin that doesn't exist, and it's not a priority. We call it dying with zero or winding down your wealth. If you're going to die with zero, you can actually make different choices in life because you're not trying to pass on this amount.
Welcome to Biz Help for You, the show that saves you the expensive learning curve by providing advice from industry experts in every facet of the entrepreneurial journey. Too many small businesses collapse. According to the U.S. Census Bureau, 20% fail within their first year, and less than 35% make it to their 10th anniversary. The goal of this podcast is to change that statistic. So if you're interested in learning more to be a successful entrepreneur, tune in today.
Jay Zigmont is the visionary behind Childfree Wealth, a unique life and financial planning firm exclusively catering to child-free and permanently childless individuals. As the founder of Childfree Wealth, he has pioneered the first ever life and financial planning firm designed specifically for the child-free community. Dr. Jay holds the prestigious designation of Certified Financial Planner and is a recognized child-free wealth specialist. He's also the author of Portraits of Child-Free Wealth and co-hosts the Childfree Wealth podcast. With a PhD in adult learning from the University of Connecticut, Dr. Jay combines his financial expertise and academic background to provide tailored financial planning services for child-free individuals, offering them valuable insights and guidance to secure their financial future. You, especially those of you with child-free or permanently childless lifestyles, can find immense benefit in his expertise when planning your personal and financial goals. So, Jay, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Kenny, man. I got to carry you around to do the intro. I mean, that's pretty impressive. Like you've got it down.
Thank you, though, for sharing the details so I could read your bio. I always like to just share a little bit of the history of how people got where they are and why you're an expert. So kind of on that note, too, I would love for you just to share your story of how you began even becoming a financial advisor to work with people in this area, because people would like to know.
Yeah, I actually come out of the coaching area. So I was doing all different types of coaching, financial coaching, life coaching, executive coaching, whatever you want to add to it. And you realize if you're going to do financial coaching, eventually have to become a certified financial planner. It's kind of just like the next step. And when I did that, one of the interesting things was there was never once a mention of being child-free in any of the education. And my wife and I are child-free. And I started this question, how weird are we? I know we're weird. We're two PhDs. We'll sit around and talk about research studies at dinner. So we're a little weird. But are we weird because we are living a child-free life? Where does that fit? And I didn't really know kind of where we fit in the world. And I actually found a Reddit group that had 1.5 million people. I'm like, oh, there's others out there. Come to find out, something like between 20 and 25% of the US are child-free, meaning they don't have kids, aren't planning on kids. Yet the financial community thinks they don't exist. All the financial planning assumes you either have kids or will have kids or, empty nest that always has kids in the picture. And when you look at it from a business standpoint, you say, okay, there's 20% of the US that have nobody serving them. That's not a bad business proposition, besides the fact that it's a group that just, needs their own specific approach.
Exactly. Well, I do agree too. I mean, I know people who purposely wanted to avoid having kids for whatever reasons. They felt, they wouldn't be good parents, or they didn't want it to affect the lifestyle they have, or, whatever that choice was. But you're right. A lot of people don't think about the fact that they're not being reached out to specifically. And, one of the things I would think that you also cover in your planning is, well, what happens when you're aging if you don't have children, right? To help, as you need that guidance, right? So I'm sure this is an important topic for a lot of people to really talk about. And I'm sure there's a lot more, to that than even the one thing that I'm thinking of. But I would love for you just to give a definition first, too, for those who are listening who might be like, well, I don't understand the difference between child-free, permanently childless. What are the differences in terms of those definitions and how it differentiates from those who do have children?
Yeah, so right now there's a popular term on social media called DINKs, dual income, no kids. And that's kind of an old school term that's now come back. And we're being specific. We're not really talking about dual income, no kids yet. Like, like
Mhm.
if you're not don't have kids yet, that's not child free or childless. When we say child free or childless, what we mean is people tends to be child free is by choice. They chose not to have kids. They're never going to have kids. Childless tends to be not by choice, which could be because of
Mm.
circumstances, medical issues, whatever it is. And a recent study out of Michigan found something like 20% of the adults over 18 consider themselves child free, meaning by choice. And another about 5% are not by choice. And those
Mhm.
numbers are not exact because it's really hard to get the numbers,
Mhm.
but it's at least a way to look at it. From my standpoint, from a financial standpoint, your financial plan changes when kids are never going to be in the picture. If you're like
Mhm.
not sure, well, then just follow the standard plan. When you've said, hey, it's not in my future for either by choice or not, that's where it changes.
Mhm. Mhm. So I think one of the things I would love to really talk about as those who are listening are mostly entrepreneurs too, is understanding this concept from an entrepreneurial perspective and how can we actually help those that are child free or childless, to meet their needs with the products or services that we also offer and be attractive to them.
Yeah. So I spend half my time talking to child-free folks about their finances, and the other half talking to financial people about child-free people. And like, hey, the first thing is they exist. They like just
Mhm.
know this group exists. And I think as a business, one of the hardest things is there are systematic and structural biases and personal biases that come across pretty quickly against the child-free community.
Mm.
And I just had somebody post online. She said she went to buy a minivan. And the first question was, well, how many kids do you have? She's like, well, I
Mhm.
don't have any. Well, how many are you planning on? None. Well, why do you want a minivan? Because I've got dogs. And like
Mhm.
there's these assumptions. And the problem is, as a business owner, you can pretty quickly turn people off by making some of those assumptions or
Mhm.
judgments. I,
Mhm.
I, I'll give you another example. I went to buy software for my company. And in the financial world, you buy software, they ask you, who do you serve? And I say, okay, I serve child-free folks. And they go, oh, so you hate kids. And I'm like, no, like that's an assumption. That's like saying,
Right.
I serve women, so I hate men. No, like you
Mhm.
just don't make those assumptions. So I think the first thing from a business owner is to look and see, do you have systematic biases or assumptions in there that cause issues? So
Mhm.
great example of this, some of the, intake forms for things get stuck when you go, well, who's your next of kin? I don't have one.
Mm.
Well, what do I do? How do I do that? How is it built in the system? Also, assumptions like in the financial world, we have a big issue where people, if they're a couple, they're automatically assumed to be married. Well, 32.1% of child-free folks will never marry. So it
Mm.
becomes all of these things. And then it becomes a question of like, how do I make my product inclusive and or focus on specific niche? So one of my colleagues, she's Laura Kale, she does a lot of research on this, and she says, look, people should market to the child-free community because it's a huge growing community that tends to do decently money. I mean, it doesn't make you rich by being
Mhm.
child-free, but yet you have some
Mhm.
disposable income and you can find a way to do that. So a great example is working with realtors. Well, the communities that a child-free person can be in are maybe different than those of parents. You start going down the
Mhm.
pathway of like, hey, it's a good school system. That doesn't help me.
Right.
It just there are these things that are built in there where, I have folks that are therapists that serve just child-free folks. I have people that do travel for child-free folks, all these different things so that the group is well represented. And to give you kind of a comparison, the same study in Michigan found somewhere just about 8% of the population was LGBTQ plus. So we're about triple the size of the community, but overlooked by many.
Mhm. Mhm. I mean, that's an interesting statistic to compare to because, like you said, yes, what we're hearing in, social media or the news or all of that is focused on a group of people where you're saying you're being ignored, and not even recognize that that group exists. So I think that's why I thought this conversation would be interesting to have, even because I don't hear very many people talking about this topic.
Well, and part of it is there's still a lot of judgment. So
Mm.
I'm in Tennessee, just outside Nashville. In the South, reproductive rights and having kids and all that big pop. I mean, a big political issue. I have more people praying for my soul than I know what to do with. Like I have people judging and all that. And the reality is, from a business standpoint, you have to choose, your message, who you're serving, how you approach that. And whether you're inclusive or not. And what happens with child-free folks is because the society as a whole, we call it a pronatalist bias. So there's a bias towards having kids. It's just an assumption. You're going to go to school, you're going to get married, you're going to have kids. You just do it. It's the American dream. You have 2.5 kids, the house, and the white picket fence. That it's built in there so much that people don't even see, oh, by the way, there's this other group. Once you see it, you see it's a very big group, and it's a very underserved group from a business standpoint. So people go, well, does it really change things? So there was a big thing, big discussion on pregnancy tests. And recently, some of the commercials have started to show people happy when it's a negative test versus just being happy when it's a positive test. Whether or not you're going to, and it sounds like a small difference, but it's a huge perspective and inclusion change of saying, hey, everybody's got different answers when these things happen. And what do they want? Where are they reaction? Where do they want to go? And as a business, you need to look at it and say, okay, am I doing things that by nature will turn off the audience? And let's be real. If you're selling kids clothes, child-free folks are not your clients. It's just not. And it's not good, bad, or ugly. I get people who come to me and their parents, and they want us to work with them as financial planners. I'll work with them, but I'm like, we're not the best place to serve you because that's not our priority. There are other products where it's kind of like, I need to serve both. And how do I find the balance between them? And that's where it becomes an opportunity. So let me give you a silly example. So I'm 45, going to be 46. I'm getting old now. But if I had kids, my kids would probably be teenagers, something along those lines. And if me and my wife were both working, we'd probably have somebody helping around the house for different things, just the economic status where we're at, whether it's a nanny or other people, providing home services or food or other things. So I said to my child-free clients, I'm like, look, if you're struggling, get yourself some support. Get yourself a nanny, not technically a nanny, but get yourself somebody to clean, somebody to take care of the house, somebody to provide food service, different things. And they went, I never thought of that. I'm like, yeah, you can still get support, but it's just not built into the system. So there's business opportunities that are huge that are just untapped.
And do you see the trends of this continuing to increase where more people are going to decide not to have children, or, where do you think this trend is really going?
So the US Census looked at childless adults. They just happen to look at biological childless or not. And over 55, they found about 16% of the US. In comparison, that study out of Michigan just did a redo of their study after the overturn of Roe and found that 26% of adults were saying they were child-free or childless. So if you look at the percentages, the younger generations much more kind of pausing and going, do I want to have kids? Versus being a default choice that you must. And I don't know where that's going long term. I think what I'm seeing when I ask people kind of why did they choose not to be child-free, most of them have more than one answer. Most of them it's pretty well thought out, but sometimes it's just finances, life you want to live. But for others, it's the environment and politics and medical issues and psychological issues, trauma and other things. I mean, big issues that they're going, I don't want to bring up a kid in this community. And I can't fault it. And by the way, I have no interest in saying that people should have kids or shouldn't have kids like that. I don't get a vote in their life. They don't get a vote in mine. But what you're seeing this societal movement. You see some areas, like you look at Japan, about 33% of the adults are child-free. And that's a huge percentage. The people go, well, if everybody's going to be child-free, well, Social Security is going to fall apart. I'm like, you're right. Social Security is based on constant growth. That's a broken system. That's not saying we need to have more kids. And that's the problem is our economy and many of the systems are based on constant growth, constant, birth rates, other things. As a society, we are way behind of trying to figure out, well, what happens if we're not doing the constant growth? And if you look at some of the environmental concerns, people talk about, I want to make a big impact on the environment. Well, having one less kid is a huge difference in carbon footprint. But it's then what is the impact of the environment? What's the impact of the economy? So I think it's growing. We'll check back with me in 20 years and I'll have a real answer. But
right. Well, and for those who are choosing is it to be child free, and like I said, I know just off the top of my head, one thing I could think of is like as you're aging and you need some help, you're going to have to plan for those, financial outlays, right? To have help or something like that too. And I'm sure there's other things that I haven't even thought of. So I'd love for you to maybe just talk about some of those issues that if you are choosing to be child free, that you need to be concerned about for either now or your future.
Yeah, I'll take the one that you started with, and we'll go from there. So I have a love-hate question, love-hate relationship with this question of like, who's going to take care of when you're older?
Mhm.
And the love part is it's a good one to discuss. The hate is there's assumptions built in there. So the
Mhm.
assumption is, hey, well, if you don't have kids, who's going to take care of you? So let's talk about the actual numbers. So the U.S. Census once again looked at adults over 55, and they found that childless adults, 2.5% were getting any financial support from their family. So that's nothing. Okay, let's just,
Mhm.
from a statistical standpoint, that's nobody. In the same population, adults over 55, they looked at parents and said, what percentage of parents are getting any financial support from their family? And the answer is 1.5%.
Mhm.
So for all those out there that have kids and think they're going to take care of you when you're older, the data says no.
Interesting.
I worked in healthcare and worked as a paramedic, and you go into the nursing facilities and you see who's getting visited and who's not. The answer is nobody's getting visited. Like it just
That's sad.
it's the truth of it. So we
Mhm.
all need to have a plan for long-term care. The difference with
Mhm.
child-free folks is we know we need to. It's just
Mhm.
like an absolute. So with my clients, my goal is by the time they hit about 45 to have a plan for long-term care, which is either putting money aside or having long-term care insurance or have some other plan. Because the thing people miss is Medicare does not pay for long-term care.
Mm.
So if you think it's going to, you'd have to go on Medicaid, which means you have to spend all your money. The other problem we have for child-free folks that is specific to us, and it's one we're working on a solution right now from a business standpoint, is who makes decisions for you when you don't have next of kin? Who's your medical power of
Mhm.
attorney, financial power of attorney, executor? And like in California, you can hire a professional fiduciary. There's some attorneys will do it, but that is a big issue. Who's going to make the decisions for you?
Mhm.
I think the interesting one, since we've got a whole bunch of entrepreneurs listening to this, the business opportunity is in the residential type communities for those as they get older, whether it's
Mhm.
child free or not. And in child free, we talk a lot about the Golden Girls homes, where a whole bunch of
Mhm.
friends can live together and support each other. It sounds silly, but
Mhm.
huge business opportunity.
Mhm.
Shared housing, co-housing, things like that. I actually just saw somebody the other day. Love this idea. What they're doing is they're doing luxury apartments. They have transportation, concierge, food, basic, everything's taken care of, all your utilities. So what they do is you can go into that facility, you'll live there most of your life, but all the basics are taken care of. They find that less than 5% and they have to go to a nursing home. So you've
Mhm.
got everything taken care of. But people don't think about it, like, well, I'd like to have all that taken care of. Like, I was like, hey, when do I get to move in? And they're like, well, when you're 55. I'm like, all right, I got to wait a little. But that's the type of thing that we can do. And what
Mhm.
happens with child-free folks, we just have to have a plan for it. Where other people are like, well, I'm hoping my kids take care of me. And I'm like, hope and dream is not a plan. But on the
Right.
on the flip side, our child-free folks are often expected to take care of their parents. You get the,
Mm.
hey, you don't have kids, so you can take care of mom. I've
Mm.
been taking care of my mother since she's, about 16. She's been disabled most of my life. And it's just part of what you do. And that has to be part of your financial plan. And people don't think about that. They hear the sandwich generation. People take care of their kids and their parents at the same time. We're the
Mhm.
open face sandwich. We're taking care of our parents, but we don't have kids. And people talk about like this baby boomers are going to pass all this money on to the next generation. The answer is no. The baby boomers are going to put it all in healthcare and long-term care because
Mhm.
it's, give you a price point on this. It on average is $115,000 a year for a skilled nursing facility.
Mm.
Women
Wow.
will spend 3.7 years in care, men 2.2. So you're talking
Mm.
about hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars that people don't have a plan for.
Mm. That's a big number. Right. It's so true to think about. Yeah, like you said, I mean, a lot of times you do say, like, oh, well, someone's going to take care of me. I've got, these, whether it's your children or a sister or, someone, and you don't think about that number where you might have to go into like a skilled facility.
Yeah, it adds up pretty quick. Another change for
Hmm.
child-free folks, and this one changed most of your financial plan, is if you're not worried about how much money you pass on to the next generation, growing your net worth across your life, at some point you got to bring it down because you're passing on money to a next kin that doesn't exist, and it's not a priority. We call it dying with zero or winding down your wealth. If you're going to die with zero, you can actually make different choices in life because you're not trying to pass on this amount. We actually get to a point with child-free folks where they say retirement's not a goal. Where more they'd rather like dial back work. I got a lot of folks starting their own small business, cutting back, hanging out shingle, doing whatever. I got somebody who wanted to start a business doing decorated flower pots. Probably won't make a lot of money, but enjoy it. They'll do it for life. That's awesome. And those are the choices we can make because the goal is not, hey, let me just pass this on to the next generation. It starts changing all these basic assumptions.
Well, I'd love to talk about too, from the employer's perspective. Like I said, I know a lot of people are going to have those biases thinking, okay, well, families with children, they're going to want to have more flex time or, these different things, and maybe not thinking that their child-free employees would want the same thing, right? So what can we do as employers to make sure that we're considering everyone in the kind of the offerings that we have, whether, there's a certain amount of vacation time or flex time or, those kind of things? What can we do to make sure that we're not, being discriminatory, thinking, well, families need this, but maybe someone without children doesn't?
Okay, I'm going to call you out on the terms because you just used a term that's loaded and was discriminatory. You said families need this, but people without children don't. People without children have families, they just don't have kids.
Right. Exactly. You're correct.
And I'm saying that with the best of love, but that's exactly the point I'm trying to make. Is people will say those things unintentionally,
right,
and say, hey, we're making a judgment. And the Society for Human Resource Management put out a report on this, and they found that child-free and childless folks are expected to work more overtime, giving less preference on vacations. There's just different set of expectations, and the numbers say they tend to work more hours, in a salary position, things like that. So let's kind of use this PTO or time off example. One of the things we see commonly is, well, you don't need Christmas off because you don't have a family. And we hear exactly those words. We're like, well, no, I do. And they go, hey, I know we scheduled you, we've approved you having this time off, but so-and-so needs to do this with their kids, so I need to have you covered. That's a judgment. If we're going to be inclusive, first come, first serve is the right answer. Let's just be honest with that. Why somebody wants to take their own personal time is their own personal reason. Right. And the policies should reflect that. If your managers are making judgment calls based on what somebody says their story is, you're automatically building in issues. Now, the weird thing is, and just kind of go with me for a second, I forget the exact number, I think it's 25 or 27 states protect against familiar discrimination, but they only actually protect against discriminating against people with kids. It doesn't actually protect people without kids. So people go, well, I guess I legally could discriminate against child-free folks. And you're probably actually right. And I don't agree with that, but that is the truth of it. And what happens is if you use family status as part of the reason you're hiring, we start getting discriminatory issues. Child-free folks, we're more likely if you go, hey, I got this new opportunity across the country, I need you to move, we're more likely to do it. My wife got a good job opportunity 1,200 miles away. We packed up the dogs and went. It's not as big of a deal. But does that mean that child-free person gets benefit because they're able to move? Or does it discriminate against those who can't move? These are the things that we don't get to. And then we get into your actual benefits. So I had a discussion with a business on this. They have very strong benefits for parents, and I'm good with that. I said, okay, and what's your equal benefit for people without kids? And they said, well, it's not discriminatory because they could take the benefit. And I'm like, no, let me use my example. So my wife and I, she has a 50-50 chance of dying if she gets pregnant. I'm not taking advantage of that benefit. It's just not going to happen. My wife worked at a university, and you could get free tuition for your kids, but not for your spouse. Well, we're never going to have kids. Can we have? No. And these are the things that are built in there. People joke about it, but it's true. Some companies are now starting to build in paternity so that if you adopt an animal, you get
Right.
I don't know what that means from an even standpoint, but how do you build in a structure that reflects the multiple lifestyles that are there? And, people go, well, you could use this benefit. Well, that's like saying, this benefit is just for men or just for women, and you could use it in theory, but you're not going to. That's discriminatory. And that's where it becomes hard as a business to figure out, how do we make a benefit package work for everybody? Our company, our benefit, we have an unlimited PTO policy. We don't ask why you go, because why? None of our business. Get the work done. Who cares? And that's built intentionally. Our medical expenses, kind of a fun one. A lot of folks, if you have a family, it's actually cheaper to cover them medically than just to cover your spouse. Well, that could be a bias. These are the things that get built in there. And I'll be honest, I don't really have a great answer on it. There's a group called New Legacy Institute that's working on how do we work on some of the policy and bigger structures around including non-parents. But our systems are not built for that right now.
Right. Well, this has definitely been an interesting discussion, and I'm sure a lot of people are going to be, kind of piquing their interest in terms of like, wow, I didn't think of this before, and I need to really review, my own thoughts on this too. And so I appreciate having this conversation. But I wanted to ask if you have an offer that you would like to extend to the listener if they, have a need of your service, or maybe they know someone who does. What might you have for them?
Sure. You can take a look at us at childfreewealth.com, Childfree Wealth on all the socials, and a Childfree Wealth podcast. I'm going to give you an example of bias just for fun. We are not on X or Twitter because Elon Musk has said childless people should not have a vote because we don't have a future in a stake in the future. That's just dumb example, and he's done a lot of other dumb stuff. But you ever wonder about bias? It's there.
Right. Okay. And how can they connect with you if they want to find you? You said that's the only place. You don't have like a LinkedIn or other.
I have LinkedIn and all those, but I am so social media at one point I want to actually come off of. I don't know about you, but you spend so much time on it. But that's always, I'm there. Just don't expect me to respond as quick as
right. Your website will be fine. Perfect.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Jay, so much for being a guest on the show and talking on this topic. Like I said, it was something that I've never had a discussion on before on this podcast. And I thought it would be interesting to hear that perspective too, because I'm a mom, a grandma, and everything too. And so, like I said, I think sometimes I may not understand everything, although I do have friends I'm able to talk to and get their perspective on that too. But I just thought it was an interesting topic to be able to have that conversation and start the conversation, because I'm sure there's a lot more that we can talk about in the future. But thank you so much for sharing your perspective.
I appreciate you having me. And I also appreciate you being willing to have this conversation. That's always the hard part. So let's just start having it.
Perfect. Well, and those who are interested in learning more on this topic too, of course, feel free to reach out to Jay and get some more information. But also you could tune into the bonus answer to a question that I asked, and you can find that link in the show notes to get that exclusive content. So thanks for joining us. Thank you for tuning in today. Would you please share this episode with those you know and leave a review on your favorite platform? And if you find our show informative, would you consider being a financial sponsor to help me continue my mission to educate business owners? A link is located in the episode description, and no amount is too small. I'd really appreciate your support. If you are interested in connecting with our guest and receiving the offer they had to share, a link to our resource page is in the show notes. Finally, if you have any bookkeeping or payroll needs, reach out to us at 310-534-5577 or contact@abandp.com. My team and I are eager to assist you. Until next time, have a great day.
Thank you for listening to Biz Help for You. Please join your host, Candy Messer, again next time. Have a terrific day.